Today we're going to cover Chapter 5 in the Flat World textbook, and it's about Moore's Law, and it's about the rate at which computing has become cheaper in terms of both storage and speed, and the impact that that's had on our society and our work life. So, I kind of go over the learning objectives. I don't even go over, I kind of like ignore them. I don't know why I do that, but the content's here. So Moore's Law, it was created, I don't know, sometimes in the 50s, maybe the 60s, and it was this fellow Moore. Maybe I'll see if I can get an article about him and post it. It was about chip performance per dollar doubles every 18 months. Just because we're making things smaller, bigger, better, and we make it the size of the chip smaller, but the capacity is bigger and the speed is better. I mean, we went from transistors to circuit boards that have thousands of transistors on them that were about the same size as a transistor, or not a circuit board, but a chip. Microprocessor is a part of the computer that executes the instructions of a computer programmer, of a computer program. There's random access memory, which is a fast chip-based volatile storage in a computer device. And there's volatile memory, is storage that is wiped clean when the power is cut off. So it's the capacity when you say, I have 8 gigs of RAM or 16 gigs of RAM on my computer. That's the kind of the desktop where all computing happens. If you've opened Excel, all your Excel activities are taking place in that volatile memory. Non-volatile memory is a storage that retains the data when the power is down. That's your hard drive. That's your solid state memory for saving your files. So that's where you say your laptop is 256 gig or 512 gig. And that's where you store your files. So volatile, non-volatile memory, random access memory is kind of like the desktop workspace. Flash memory is non-volatile. So what was non-volatile again? Storage that remains there. When it's chip-based storage, and it's when your computer's turned off, it stays. Now I'm actually broadcasting, if you will, from my iMac. It has 1 terabyte of storage, non-volatile, in the hard drive. Half of it, which is 500 gigs of storage, is a traditional hard drive that's mechanical, electromechanical. In other words, it has disks in it that actually rotate and the computer reads. The other half, another 500 gig, is this flash memory, which is a solid state kind of chip-based storage that's non-volatile. Solid state electronics is semiconductor-based devices. Well, it used to be TVs and radios when they first came out were vacuum tube oriented. And those vacuum tubes were, they weren't memory devices, but they were certainly volatile. They were so sensitive. They were had filaments in it, like light bulbs, and really sensitive filaments, and tubes would always be going out and you had to replace them. We've moved pretty much to solid state, starting first with transistors, and then transistors don't really exist because you have the equivalent number of transistors on a semiconductor. So a semiconductor is a substance such as silicon dioxide used inside most computer chips that is capable of enabling or inhibiting the flow of electricity. And that enablement or inhibiting really works like a vacuum tube used to do, to either amplify things or isolate things, or however you direct it to do things. Now, if you think of some sort of chip like a RAM chip storage, or the processor, the CPM, the central processing unit, CPU, on a computer, which holds basically all the controls of the computer and how the computer operates. Like every laptop, every desktop that you have has one of these. Those chips are probably, I don't know, a third of the cost of the computer. But the amount of materials that go into it is full of semiconductor materials, such as silicon dioxide. There's probably pennies worth of plastic, copper, and silicon dioxide inside of it. The reason they cost so much is the value add when you manufacture it and transform those pennies of sand where the silicon comes from, the copper, raw copper, and the plastic pellets from which the casing and the substrate and all that is done, is the science and technology behind creating a central processing unit from those pennies worth of ingredients. Another way, you can communicate data through copper-based wires, which happens a lot, or fiber optic lines. Fiber optic lines are high-speed glass or plastic-linked networking cable used in telecommunications. Light travels faster than electricity. Light through one of these fiber optic lines travels faster than electricity does through copper. And speed is everything. So advanced rates of technology, silicon storage, and telecom. So Moore's law doubles every 18 months, the number of transistors on a chip. And that is this line right here. Data storage doubles in 12 months, bits per square inch. So remember, there's bits and bytes. If you want to understand that level of computer technology, Google it, look it up, learn about it. It's not the purview of this class. But it's a basic storage unit of a 0 and 1. And fiber optical doubles every 9 months, bits per second. And this has traditionally been the history. So when we talk about pure elasticity, the rate at which the demand for a product or service fluctuates with price change, if you recall from microeconomics, it's the change in quantity divided by the change in price. So evolving waves of computing. In the 60s, we had mainframe computers, probably the size of the room that I'm in right now. In the 70s, we went to mini computers, which were smaller, took up less space because as the chips became more powerful and the storage became smaller but could hold more information, you didn't need such a large thing. The original computers were all vacuum tube based. It wasn't even until transistors became available that you really had the first mainframe computers. The first ones were vacuum tube based, and they were, I don't think they were as powerful as a calculator you could buy today. Your cell phone today is more popular than the computers that were on the Gemini or Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft. In the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, we started with personal computers. The IBM was the first one that had it. And they were the size of, they were like a small boat anchor on your desk. Compaq had a portable personal computer, and it folded up like a small suitcase. In the 90s, the internet came on the scene. Amazon, I think, was started in 1993. In 2010, we have this idea of pervasive computing. So what are we talking about? Vision of embedding low-cost sensors, processors, communication into a wide array of products and everything, just everywhere. And that's basically called the Internet of Things. I guess if you're, it allows a vast network to collect data, analyze input, automatically coordinate, and collectively take action. Tech is everywhere, from the smart thermostat, which I have one, to the tweeting diaper. I've not seen a tweeting diaper, and I think my last grandkid is just coming out of diapers now, and no one's ever talked to me about a tweeting diaper. But a smart thermostat, we put new furnaces in probably 4 or 5 years ago in our house, and we had to change the thermostats, and I can control it from as I said, I think in a previous lecture, from my iPhone, where I used to have to crouch down, look at the thermostat, and there was a small window, maybe half an inch by 3 inches, in which I had to program everything daily. Now I can do it on my smartphone. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. So dumb thermostats control about half the energy use in a typical home. Nest users report shaving their heating and cooling bills for about 20% on the average, if you use it properly. So Nest is loaded with Moore's Law kinds of devices, the Internet of Things. It's motion sensors to tell if anyone's in the room, temperature sensors, Wi-Fi connection, the doorbell that is popular, where you can see who's at the door on your cell phone, and it all runs on an operating system called Linux. Other examples of that we could talk about is an umbrella that receives wireless weather reports and will flash when rain is likely. I've not heard about this. I've not seen one. That still doesn't stop me from leaving my umbrella in the car when I'm in the office and the rain starts, and the umbrella could have been flashing for a half hour and I never would have seen it. Or I'm in my car and oops, it's starting to rain, and I didn't see the flashing umbrella because it's in my office instead of with me in the car. Tech is ever, we're talking about smart diapers, tweeting diapers. That still intrigues me. There's billboards apparently in Japan that peer back at passersby, guessing at their demographics, and instantly changes their advertising on the spot. I think if this was really popular, we'd see it in the United States. So I'm guessing that these are things that people are experimenting with. So the Tweet P by Huggy sends a text or a social message when a diaper activity is detected. So it is experimental. There's low-cost hardware hacking is made easier with this Raspberry Pi, a computer with some models smaller than 2 sticks of gum that can run a full PC operating system and cost as little as $5. Google that. That's crazy. Some students have worked with microcontrollers like the Arduino in their high school. Well, microcontrollers have been used for a long time in factory machinery. They are what allows people, one person to operate 10 injection molding machines, as opposed to when I started in business where one person operated one machine. And now microcontrollers are the things that you can run several machines from a control panel someplace. And so let's see. Okay, I'll let the phone ring. So Moore's Law actually even goes inside your medicine cabinet, and probably there's swallowable things that have microchips on them that can do things and provide remote diagnostics for physicians. So, if it gets cheaper and cheaper to do things. So this idea of this glow cap is a smart pill bottle that will flash when you're supposed to take your medicine. That would be really helpful, I think, for some people. I think, I don't know how well that's going to take off because, one, you have to see the light, and two, you have to be cognizant that things like this are happening. I think the pill pack technology that Amazon bought is probably more realistic in a short time. It will play a music an hour later for your dose, and will squirt a signal into the nightlight that flashes as a reminder. in case you're out of view of the cat. So they can be set to call or send text if you haven't responded past the previous set time. The device will send a report to you, your doc, or whoever else you see, and could even alert the pharmacy when it's time for refills. I think this would be of value to people that are concerned about elderly parents but don't live in the same town or live farther away. For those of you that have elderly parents, you want to make sure they take their medicines at the right time. So if you could, with the Internet of Things, provide that kind of feedback, it could be helpful. Well, and there might, I emphasize this, be a chip inside the pill. So here's one, Proteus. They have an ingestible tech, a sensor made of food and vitamin materials that can be swallowed in medicine. It's activated and powered by the body's digestive acids, which is basically hydrochloric acid. And once digested, the chip sends out a signal with vitals such as heart rate, body angle, temperature, sleep, and more. Medtronic, which is a large hospital and medical product provider, has a pill cam. Comes up with maybe up to 2 cameras that can be, once swallowed, can relay images of your insides, used to diagnose intestinal and colon problems. So maybe it could replace a colonoscopy. Maybe you swallow it, it goes through your digestive tract, and probably you don't even have to retrieve it when it is expelled from your body because it's already sent everything to, probably via your phone, to your doctor. So AdhereTech is a free system that works with pharmacies and pharma companies, dispatches expert follow-up advice and help to resolve issues so patients stay on their meds. And I'm not sure how that works, but anything you can conceive of is probably happening these days. So bits and bytes, we talked about that. So computers express data as bits that are either 0 or 1. Everything is saved as zeros and ones. They're binary computers. And each one of these zeros and ones is called a bit. 8 bits form a byte. Think of a byte as a single character you can type from a keyboard. So 8 bits of 2 to the 8th power. What is that? I don't know. I should know that. I don't know. Let me get my calculator up. Hey Siri, calculator. There's my calculator. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. There's 64 possibilities of zeros and ones. There are combinations you can have. A kilobyte refers to the following 1,000 bytes. So kilo, just like the metric system, which we don't use in the United States. A megabyte is 1,000,000 bytes. A gigabyte, 1 billion. Terabyte, 1 trillion. And then you expect to hear about petabytes and it's 1 quadrillion, and an exabyte, which is 1 quintillion. While storage is most obviously listed in bytes, telecommunication capacity, bandwidth is often referred to as bits per second. And the reason is that because you're interested in the rate at which it's transmitted. On my computer, I want to know how many videos I can store. So I'm interested in how many bytes of storage I have, because a video takes, several gigabytes of storage to save one video, and I want to know how many movies I can put on my hard drive, for example. But if I'm talking about telecommunication, if I'm talking about internet, I want to know how fast it is, how many gigabytes can be transferred. If any of you recall dial-up internet, and you were trying to download a song or download a movie, it could take a long time. Things are much faster because the bits per second has increased so dramatically over time because of this Moore's law and the associated technology advancement. So, the cell phones are also transforming the lives of some of the poorest people in the world. I guess out of the 7, 8 billion people in the world, there are still 3 billion that don't have a cell phone, but they will soon or within range. I recall when I first started traveling to countries that had horrible landline systems. Think Venezuela, think countries in Africa, wherever you may go. And what happened was the technology leapfrogged, and this has to do with disruptive technologies. That's in the next chapter, that the cell phone basically is. It put affordable telecommunications in the hands of the poorest people of the world. People didn't have house phones. They never had to get a house phone. They didn't have to go through the process of laying all the wires and telephone poles and lines and connecting all the houses and getting hardware distributed everywhere, because they just put in cell towers and got the cheap cell phones as you could get, and people had telephones all of a sudden. Everybody had their own communication device. So 80% of the world's population lives within the cell phone network range. I don't know how old that data point is. So 3/4 of the world's poorest people get their food or income by farming still. Even though I think, wasn't it just last year that we passed the tipping point where the majority of people now live in urban settings than rural and agrarian settings? So I think that statistic flies in the, it conflicts with the other statistics. So you got to take these with a grain of salt. Farmers traditionally don't have accurate information on what their products are worth. So like in Ghana, a Ghanaian firm, Isoko, delivers market prices, farming tips. Farmers wake up early in the morning and go farming. I remember when I was younger and I would turn the radio on, AM radio, maybe early in the morning, and I would be up before anybody else in the house and just explore the dial to see what's going on. I would find farm reports in which it would give the daily prices of corns and soybean and other commodities that local farmers were growing, because they want to know. So why do you have to listen to the radio? You can get it if you have connection to the internet. You can get all your information there, including this kind of information. So transitioning to the next section is, well, is there a limit to Moore's law? Well, yeah, there has to be, because I think physics by itself will put a limit on that. So it's possible, because the distance between pathways inside silicon chips gets smaller with each successive generation. So semiconductor fabrication facilities, silicon wafer, thin circular slice of material used to create semiconductor devices. The packing pathways tightly creates problems associated with size, heat, and power. Moore's law isn't, it's a rule of thumb. It's not a universal dictum or law. And while it was probably accurate in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it probably is not so accurate today. Chips start to melt when they get smaller because the flow of electricity creates heat. That's called resistance. That's what resistance does. Everything doesn't flow efficiently and freely. Fiber optics is probably better for that. They need to cool modern data centers, and that draws a lot of power and costs a lot of money. So there's this concept of quantum tunneling when the chips get smaller. And so the need to cool modern data centers draws a lot of power. You've heard of this idea of server farms. You talk about cloud computing and the internet. Well, all that computing, everything is not done inside your phone. It's done out there somewhere in the internet. It's done out there in the cloud. It's done on the servers of rented servers that people lease space from, or servers of captive servers of various companies. So the need to cool modern data centers draws a lot of power and is expensive. Here's a couple of examples. Microsoft has submerged 850 servers on a patch of seabed deep underneath the coast off of Scotland's some islands in Scotland, and where this kind of design lowers temps about to 10 degrees cooler than land-based data centers. Facebook has a data center in Sweden just 70 miles from the Arctic Circle where the average winter temperatures are minus 12 centigrade. So server farms are thought to draw 5% of all energy use in the US. Wow, that's a lot when you think about it. You don't pay any attention, but you want an experience about this? Put a laptop on your lap without a pad under it or anything, and you'll see how warm it gets. So, buying time and keeping Moore's laws going. Multi-core processors contain 2 or more calculating processing cores on the same piece of silicon. They outperform a single speedy chip while running cooler and drawing less power. Most PCs and laptops sold have at least 2-core, dual-core processors. They can run older software written in single brain chips by using only 1 core at a time. And firms are radically boosting speed and efficiency of the chips, taking chips from being paper flat devices and built up to 3D affairs. Transistors, which used to be single unit things with 3 prongs coming out of them, replaced the vacuum tube. The chips have replaced the transistor by housing hundreds and thousands of transistors on a single chip. So they're tiny on and off switches in a chip that can collectively work to calculate and store things in memory. New materials, those things you want to look at. So it's likely we'll come to a grinding halt in our lifetime, maybe your lifetime. What are people doing? Scientists are concentrating on improving the very semiconductor material that chips are made of. They have these hyper-efficient chips of the future that may be made out of carbon nanotubes. Easy to say, hard to know what they mean by that without a Google search. Signals are sent via light rather than electricity, and that promises to be faster than conventional chips, probably cooler as well. Some others are experimenting by creating computing components using biological material. I mean, your brain is a computer, and it uses biological material, cells, to do all of this. So there's conjecture that one day pharmaceutical companies should be able to create hyper-detailed representations of our bodies that reveal drug side effects before they're even tested on humans. I remember when I worked at Colgate-Palmolive, they had the artificial mouth. I used to laugh at that concept, but basically what it was a testing feature where they could, I never actually saw it, but I knew it existed, where they could test new toothpastes and see if it would have any adverse reaction on, gums and tooth enamel and all this stuff, the artificial mouth. Quantum computing might also predict weather months in advance or offer unbreakable computer security. Let's see how unbreakable it is. But that's, for coding. Right now, encryption is gotten crazy. Why do you need secret codes now? The encryption works so well, and you've all seen that, cracking that code when there was a terrorist event and Apple did not want to share the secrets to uncode it or whatever keys. Usually this has to do with large prime numbers. And I remember reading about it a long time ago that you could create uncrackable codes or codes that would take so much computing power to crack that the encryption methodologies. In fact, it's gotten to the point where there's a cybersecurity attack that's called ransomware. It's a program that goes into your corporate servers and basically encrypts all the data that you need to run your company and you can't get it. Oh, you want your data back? We'll unencrypt it because they know the key for it. But you've got to pay them, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to get your data back. You got a gun to your head. Or they could destroy the data and you'd have to reconstruct your entire network. So people pay this ransomware and they pay other firms to help them fight it. So parallel computing, supercomputing, grids, clusters, and putting all these smarts in that idea of the cloud. Well, what is a supercomputer? It's whatever the computer is that's the fastest at any given time in the world is considered a supercomputer. Supercomputing was once considered the domain of governments and high-end research labs. These are the computers that played chess against chess masters. Because, an artificial intelligence may require, and machine learning and all these things may require this kind of supercomputing. I remember when I was studying algorithms in operations research, and we were doing optimization problems, and I said, well, why don't you just enumerate all the possible solutions and then rank order them and pick the one that's, if it's a minimum problem, pick the minimum one. If it's a maximum problem, pick the maximum one. And my professor told me, he goes, because enumerating all of that would take forever on computers. Well, I think that for most business problems I see right now, I could go through algorithms that would help me find the optimal solution to things. But I think I could also enumerate all the possibilities almost as quickly because computing time has gotten so slow. I haven't really tested it out. I don't really care to. If we're going to solve a linear program, nothing I solve is that complicated or has that many variables. But if you have 1,000 variables and 1,000 constraints, enumerating all the integer solutions to that problem could take you forever. Could take a vast amount of computer time. I remember doing the equivalent of big data back in the 1980s. Sometimes I would do the search to download the data, and I'd set it up when I left my office at night and come back in the morning, and hopefully it was done by then. I think now it would take seconds. That's how fast things have gotten. So high performance computing, it means massively parallel computers specifically designed to deliver more power than conventional off-the-shelf computer. By parallel, it means if you could separate the tasks into things that can be done at the same time, you would have processors that could do them all at the same time. Think of a network diagram in a project for project management. If you have things that can be done at the same time and shorten the length of the project, you would assign teams to it. If there's things that can be computed simultaneously and then brought together at the end for the result, why can't you use parallel computing systems to do that? So much of modern supercomputing is done by massively parallel processing. And, calculate the next prime number. I don't know. There's places you can look on the web to find out what's the largest prime number known. It probably has, I don't know, how many digits to it. And calculating the next one, because the dispersity of prime numbers, as the numbers get bigger, get wider and wider and wider. And calculating the next prime number is really a test of supercomputing and how well it does, or at least it used to be. Grid computing. This is a methodology where you have some software to enable several computers to work together on a common problem as if they were massively parallel computers. So it's not, instead of one entity being a parallel computer or have parallel computing inside of it, it chain links other computers. I'm not sure how that works. I've never had a need to do it. I'm not NORAD, or I'm not NASA, or I'm not doing those kinds of computing myself. Probably in your lifetime you'll never need it either. And if you do need it, you probably won't even know it's happening in the background. Cluster computing. It's connecting server computers via software and networking so that they can be used to collectively solve computing tasks. So it's kind of, I think it's the server equivalent of grid computing. And then multi-core, we've talked about massively parallel grid and cluster computer, all related. Computers don't have to be co-located in the same box or in the same room or in the same building to be able to do this. The other thing we look at is you hear about this, software as a service, SaaS. It's a form of cloud computing, which they define it next. Cloud computing, replacing computing resources with services provided over the internet. Do you use cloud computing? I use it all the time. I use Dropbox and I use Box. All of my North Park files are on Box. And I have 3 computers I use. And on one of the computers, all the files reside in a Box server someplace. Maybe not even the same server. As far as I don't know, but it's all there. On 2 of my computers, the files don't even exist on my hard drive. I access them through the internet, through Wi-Fi, or through hardline connection to the internet, and access the files. But it looks like it's just my own hard drive. That's why computers now only have to have 256 gig of storage if you use cloud storage effectively and pay for it. It's automatically backed up, it's preserved, it's theoretically safe. It's safer than being on your own hard drive. On my home desktop, I have it resident also on my hard drive as kind of a backup. So software as a service is the computing that happens in that cloud environment. Many small companies that use QuickBooks, Intuit to run their companies don't necessarily have all the Intuit software and all their data on their own hard drives. They may have a replica of it on their hard drives, which makes it easier to access, and you can still do things if like the internet is down, but mostly it resides in this cloud, which means on servers you don't actually own yourself, but pay some rent to. And server farms, as we talk about, are a massive network of computer servers running software and kind of are a collective hard drive for lots and lots of different people. So latency is the delay in network and data transfer speeds. Low latency systems are faster systems. High latency, the reason the idea of latency is kind of interesting. I'm a musician, and in this isolation due to COVID, we tried to have some Zoom jam sessions. Well, it doesn't work because of this idea of latency. So if I play a note, the people aren't hearing it. It's like if you have 2 TVs in your house. We have one in the kitchen, one in the family room. It's one big room. Sometimes we're watching the same program, and you could detect that there's a delay in the sound on one versus the other. That's latency. So if we're trying to perform music, which is, and 3 people are playing together, it's important that the 3 musicians hear each other real time. Latency delays that. So if I play a note, musician 2 may hear it a fraction of a second before musician 3 hears it, and both of those are later than I played it. So trying to play music this way just doesn't work because of this latency issue. We talked about Moore's Law, again, likely to hit its physical limit, but experimental quantum computing could make computers more powerful. And you don't know what the next breakthrough is. I mean, people couldn't have predicted solid state when they were living in a vacuum tube world. So what is the next innovation here? Which is what we're going to talk about in the next chapter, actually. So Watson was the first supercomputer. It's a robust, and the Watson of today is different than the first Watson. Is a robust cloud-based computing platform that allows any organization to tap into all sorts of devices, including natural language processing, image recognition, data analysis, machine learning to uncover new insights. Deep QA technology behind Watson is already being used by healthcare professionals as kind of what they call an exobrain. And it could leverages massive diagnosis databases while scanning hundreds of pages. So you don't need, if your doctor is not sure what they're reading, and doctors get tired and don't read x-rays and CAT scans and all that stuff, this will probably not make those kind of errors. Do we take the expertise of the human being out of it? I think you'll always need it, but if things can be codified and we put rules and decision rules behind it, I think you can, and you have the computing power to do it, you can and should do it. So IBM is partnering with a voice recognition company in Massachusetts to bring Watson's expertise to the doctor's office. I mean, we're already talking about telehealth. We're already talking about swallowing smart chips, encapsulated pills to feed this kind of thing. And for telehealth and telediagnosis, why shouldn't you have the best person or the best system in the world reading your x-rays and then corroborated by a human being? Why not? So here's the dark side of Moore's Law. As we create all this stuff, think about disposal of batteries, the amount of batteries that we use. I mean, people are buying AA batteries and 9-volt batteries by sleeves of 20 and 40 at a time and using them and throwing them out. Where does all that waste go? Where do all the chemicals inside all of the electronics that we throw away? I mean, if I go to my city dump and I just went and threw out an old TV, where does all the, and those are all solid state, so and there's all full of different kinds of metals and potentially polluting or toxic materials inside of them. Where does it all go? So the planet generates 50 million tons of e-waste, of electronic waste, and the results aren't pretty. They may be toxic since many components contain lead, cadmium, or mercury. And the quick answer would be to recycle, but how do you recycle stuff like that? How do you recycle batteries? So it's easier to, mainstream recyclable products are like plastic or aluminum are easy to separate. But when it's all melded together inside of a chip or something like that, it's harder to separate the various components. Also, there is the bright side, if there is one, is there's silver, platinum, and copper in these that are, if they can figure out a way to get them out easily, quickly, fast, there might be a business in that. So the process of separating these densely packed materials inside text, so you can harvest all these materials, this is a tough thing to do. Sending e-waste abroad can be 10 times cheaper than dealing with it at home. China was recycling some 70% of the world's e-waste, and I think they just stopped. They stopped taking it because they're generating enough of their own to serve their needs. And not surprisingly, the U.S. lags behind in legislation regarding this. Philadelphia burns half of what it collects as recycling. Californians recycle less in 2017 than in any time since the measurement began. I don't know. You can't do this by legislation. You have to do it by PR is the best way to do it. I mean, you can try to legislate smoking away, but PR campaign has had a great time. You can't legislate the use of seatbelts. The use of seatbelts was done by a combination of annoying beeps when you start your car, But if you're willing to sit it out, you don't have to put your seatbelt on. But people put it on because of a massive PR campaign over decades. So I think that that's one way. I have more faith in that than any legislation. You have to pay attention to this garbage, but the Internet of Trash may help. I love that term. No solutions are big enough to make e-waste go away completely, but tech will increasingly present solutions. In the last year or two, robotics and artificial intelligence have gotten good enough to be economically viable for high volume recycling. Again, that's due to Moore's law and being able to compute stuff faster, quicker, and having the inputs, the visual sensors and whatnot to be able to differentiate and take things apart. Human beings have been invaluable in factories because we're very nimble and dexterous in our fingers, and our brains can process things much quicker from an analog standpoint than machines can. Waste management, one of the biggest players in the trash, the large trash management company, now uses 3 different types of robots to separate recycling from contaminants. And they do the job better, quick. Who wants to do that job? That's the lowest paying, tedious, boring, probably dirty job there is. And if you can get robots to do it, and they will do it much more effectively and efficiently, go for it. And again, like I said, the sensors for detection are now cheaper and they're far more accurate, enabling the tech to help put garbage in the right place. I like that. So you have to think proactively to stay ahead of legislators. And they must plan for products' end of life and waste that they create. So almost in your design, you have to think of the sustainability. And sustainability has become much more prevalent in the world because younger people are sensitized to it. And, there was a time where, doing what was good for the environment was not done because it would cost you more money to do it. If you can figure a way to save money or make money doing it, that gets business people's attention. Why LED lights? You want to switch to LED lights? Yes, it will cut your electric bill by 2/3. Why wouldn't I do that in a warehouse that costs me $2,000 a month in electricity? If I can cut it down to $500 a month, why wouldn't I put LED lights in the entire football field-sized warehouse? And then advertise the living daylights out of it in my annual report saying we're such a green company. So if you can make it a business compelling reason, people don't do things for altruism, they do things for economic gain. And if it's the right thing and it provides economic gain, that's the kind of thing that you want to get to. Finding responsible e-waste disposers. I don't know. I guess there was a sting operation of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO. They found 43 American recyclers were willing to sell e-waste illegally to foreign countries without gaining EPA or foreign country approval. I mean, you send your trash to other countries. I think other countries are getting, why should it be in our landfill? Why should we put our stuff in your landfill? So how can firms choose the proper disposal departments? Well, how do firms choose the proper outsourced factories in third world countries to make sure that they're not using child labor? You don't see much news of that coming out anymore because once news of that started coming out, people were horrified that products that they were buying at Walmart were made by child labor, or their Nike shoes involve child labor. Oh my God. And Nike and Walmart then changed their practices and spent a lot more attention and put some rules and inspection in place to make sure that their suppliers were providing a low price but not at the risk of using child or labor. The same thing applies here. if you don't manage it well, and if you don't verify what you think you've signed up for, you can do that. I mean, people get around laws in the United States all the time. No one can hire illegal. You're not allowed to hire illegal immigrants to work in your factory. Yet there are plenty of illegal immigrants. And by illegal, I'm not meaning that people are illegal. I mean illegal in terms of current U.S. law. That comes from my son, the immigration attorney. So that people aren't illegal, but they are illegally by the law here, and you're not supposed to employ them. So what I do is I hire an employment agency to get me my temp workers. I ask them the question, do you hire illegal immigrants? Oh, no, sir. But of course they do. And they say, no, sir. So the onus is on them. And you've got a level of filter in case the INS comes into. And it's just, people do crazy things to get around some of these laws. But again, if you have the right kind, that's where government oversight kind of could be helpful to shine lights on this. And then companies don't want that bad publicity, and then will do their best to make sure that their e-waste disposers are not just shipping it out of the country. This last little section here, if we talk about the Internet of Things, I guess I've been to Disney maybe 4 years ago, Disneyland. Took my then 3-year-old grandson there. They've streamlined your experience to delight you and therefore keep you spending. The centerpiece is this magic band, which allows keyless entry to your hotel room, pay for rides. Well, we didn't stay in a hotel. We didn't have any of that. Locate you to deliver restaurant meals, personalized greetings, etc. So the My Disney Experience website and mobile app allows consumers to plan and share and manage their itinerary. Man, all I know from our trip to Disneyland is that for every ride we took, we went between Christmas and New Year's, we probably had to wait 20 minutes to a half hour. So if you're there for 5-6 hours, that's 10 half hours of waiting for a 5-minute ride or a 10-minute ride. I was like, I don't think the wearable wristband would have helped at all. Try to buy food, the lines were incredible. All right. But this magic band in Disney's World, Be Our Guest restaurant was inspired by the fairy tale dining experience in Beauty and the Beast, and was launched to glowing reviews. And I guess that makes sense. If I have some sort of device and everything is, the hotel, the restaurants, the theme parks are all owned by the same company, this is a quick way. You can order things and it just goes on your hotel bill. Or if you're part of a package, it doesn't charge you for the things that are part of the package, and it charges you for the things that are outside your package. So, and it makes for a more effective and efficient as possible. And crowds can overwhelm the rides and the wait times for those. So, it can turn a long wait time into a time-filling, interactive experience. Photos taken by park photographers and other experienced cameras are linked to your band's ID and will feed images to My Disney smartphone app. I don't know. If I'm waiting in line, there's only so many smart Disney iPhone app pictures I'm going to look at. I'm still going to get nervous waiting that long. That's just me. Other people may enjoy their little app. So anyway, I'm not going to dwell on this too much. You get the idea of how the Internet of Things works. More importantly is this big data and big benefits. There is so much data generated by all this Internet of Things, all these sensors, all these chips, which are collecting data and storing it. What do we do with all this data? Well, you want to take all of this data, you want to mine it and refine it and turn it into actionable information. Disney can take all of this information coming off your wrist and your apps, and they know where people go, and they see that if people go to this ride, oh, the line's too long, and they go to which ride did they go to? And then how do you maybe route people through the park in a different way to minimize waits or whatever? I mean, the best way to minimize waits is not let so many darn people in to the park. But as long as people are willing to go and wait a half hour for a 10-minute ride or a 5-minute ride and do that over and over and over again all day, what's the value of it? So they claim to have cut turnstile transaction time by 30%. If I go to Disney parks all the time, well, I could just, become a member, and I have my, it's like a casino. If you're a frequent flyer at casinos, they give you your own, like, casino card, probably has a chip in it, and everywhere you go, it knows who you are. And as Mr. Gavoor, thank you for coming. Your suite you've lost so much money over the past 6 months that we'll put you in the presidential suite. Thank you for your business. So all of this can help track and provide good service to people. Airlines have been doing it for a long time, not necessarily with the Internet of Things, but with their customer value program. When I was flying a lot, I might be sitting on a coach flight, and the flight attendant comes and says, "Mr. Gavoor, come with me." And I knew exactly what she was doing. Because there was this empty seats in business class or first class, they were putting me in it because I traveled a lot, and that was their way of showing reward for people that spend a lot of money with them. So that's the value of these things. So the magical experience costs serious money. So my Magic Plus costs roughly $1 billion, I guess. That sounds like a lot of money, requiring over 100 systems to be integrated. Doors needed replacement. Park entry checks had to be upgraded. 30 million feet of Wi-Fi coverage needed to be installed. And everybody needed to be retrained. But it's like implementing an ERP system. It's kind of the ERP system, or the CRM system, the customer relationship management experience. If you want to stay ahead of the competition and make the experience as good as possible, it's an expense you have to pay, and then you have to maintain a darn thing and keep upgrading it. So, magical experiences require magical coordination. Well, certainly, like any system like this, it's a CRM system or it's a ERP system, depending on how you look at it. There's a business process behind it. Everybody that operates in it, all your employees have to be operating as the same business process as the business process in the system. And the business process in the system has to be really effective. It can't be haphazard. So all of this requires a lot of work and maintenance to do it. But if you do it right and do it well, and many people do, you end up with a sustainable competitive advantage. So if we look into the future here, there's all kinds of good and bad services that are probably on deck to help this. I talked about before the amount of sensors on the roads in China. No one speeds, because you'll come home and have $100 worth of tickets. Well, could we do that in the United States, the land of the free, home of the brave? Don't tell me how to drive. I don't know, maybe. But there's all kinds of things that we can do. Universal is trying to copy Disney. Other people in hospitality will do the same thing. But it's not just limited to hospitality. I mean, the apps and ordering, and, if I want to go to Starbucks, and who wants to wait? Who wants to stand in a store while they're making your 4 drinks? If I'm buying 4 drinks, I use the app. It knows what I've liked. It keeps track of things. enhances the, those kinds of ordering apps enhance your customer's experience. It tracks your rewards on a small scale. It's not anywhere near Disney, but that's a trend that will follow. It will follow business. Business to business does that. If you're a contractor and if you exclusively buy all your stuff from Lowe's or Home Depot, I'm sure they have a phone app that keeps track of your purchases and things over time and probably gives you other discounts to maintain your loyalty. Why wouldn't it? That's great. So this is not changing. And that's basically it for this presentation on Chapter 5, Moore's Law. Thank you so much.